Good evening. On the behalf of the City of Longview, welcome to everyone that's here. The February 21st Planning and Zoning Commission meeting of the City of Longview is now called to order. At this time, I'm going to ask that Commissioner Chad Harkey give us the invocation and remain standing.
Bow your heads with me. Dear Lord, thank you for this day and all of your many, many blessings. And just thank you for allowing us to come here today, Father, and just serve the city of Longview. We pray for wisdom, Father, as we make decisions on behalf of this city. We just pray that you continue to bless this city. In your name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
The pledge of allegiance.
To the flag of the
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The first item on the actual agenda is the approval of the minutes from the last meeting in January. Have all the commissioners had an opportunity to look over them? If so, I will entertain a motion for approval.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Have a motion and a second for approval. All in favor of those say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, they are approved. We have reached the citizen comment portion of the meeting. This portion of the citizen comment are comments that are made other than the public hearing items. If you're here to address an agenda item tonight, if you want to speak on that, if you'll just stay seated, we'll get to that in just a few minutes. But is there anyone who would like to speak for the citizen comment part? I see no one. So moving on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda is to meet the requirements of City of Longview subdivision ordinance. The items will be approved with one vote unless any member of the Planning and Zoning Commission or any member of the public or the applicant wants the item removed and placed on the regular agenda. Anyone like any item on the consent to be moved? I see no one, so I will entertain a motion for approval of the consent item.
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Passes by unanimous. We are now to the regular agenda part of the meeting, and the purpose of this is to hear all of the pertinent testimony of those in support of and those in opposition to the applications before the Commission for rezoning. Tonight is the first of two public hearings required to approve a change in the zoning, and the Commission also considers plats. The procedure will be as follows. First of all, we will hear from the staff. Second, we hear from the applicant. And then third, the general public. If you're part of a large group that is going to either speak for or against it, then we ask that you please get a spokesman so that we don't hear the same testimony over and over. When all sides have spoken, then I will end the public hearing portion of the meeting and we will vote on the request. Zoning request and the Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendations will go forward to a second meeting for the City Council, which will be on March the 9th. We're now to item A of the regular agenda. Angela.
Thank you. This is a public hearing we held to consider application S23-01 filed by Yuang Chen, requesting a specific use permit to allow for a restaurant with a private club in general retail zoning district for approximately 1.665 acres of Lot 2A Marketplace Number 1, located at 2802 Tuttle Boulevard. So the applicant is requesting a specific use permit for a restaurant with a private club in general retail zoning district. A specific use permit is required to allow for the on-site consumption of alcoholic beverages in addition to beer and wine within general retail zoning district to ensure no negative impact on surrounding properties. Staff finds the proposed zoning change is consistent with our future land use map and surrounding uses. Therefore, it does not constitute spot zoning. I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Angela, this is the former Luby's Cafeteria, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Do any of the commissioners have any questions or comments at this point? If not, if the applicant would like to come forward, if you would like to do and add anything to it or speak for the request,
The applicant, he's here, so if y'all have any questions, he's here to answer them.
you may come to the mic, please.
Hi, good evening, gentlemen. My name is Andy. I'm the owner for this location. So the restaurant gonna be the K-pot. So we serving like Asian hot pot with the Korean barbecue, like a concept.
Asian barbecue food, is that what
It's
you're
like
saying?
it's like a Chinese hot pot style with combined with Korean barbecue style.
Okay. Any of the commissioners have a question? Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you.
I will now open the public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak in support of the request? I see none. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak against the request? I see none. So as a result of this, I will close the public hearing and entertain a motion. We have a motion to approve. Do I
Second?
hear a second?
Second?
All in favor, say yes.
Yes.
All opposed, say no. Passes unanimous. Regular agenda item B. Angela.
Thank you. A public hearing will be held to consider application S23-02 filed by East Texas Fuels, Inc., requesting a specific use permit to allow for a restaurant with a drive-through window in general retail zoning district for approximately 5.906 acres, a portion of lots 2B, 3A-1, 3B, Block 1112, LL Woolley subdivision, located at 2301 Judson Road. The applicant is requesting a specific use permit for a drive-through window in general retail zoning district to ensure no negative impact on surrounding properties. The applicant is proposing to construct approximately one-story, 5,800 square foot convenience store with a drive-through window. Judson Road is classified as a principal arterial roadway and is maintained by TxDOT. Staff finds that the proposed zoning change is consistent with our future land use map and surrounding uses, therefore it does not constitute spot zoning. I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Any questions for Angela? You're getting off easy, Angela. I see none. Is the applicant present? I think someone from, what I see, Johnson and Pace? Would you like to come forward and speak to this in case they have any questions?
I'm Joe Hart with Johnson & Pace, 1201 Northwest Loop 281. We're just requesting the specific use permit to allow for the drive-through in the convenience store, and welcome to.
Strictly a restaurant?
No, sir, it's a convenience store.
store.
That'll serve, food, or they haven't landed on a particular brand. It may be, they may self-brand something and run it themselves, or they may franchise. It's just, we're early in the process to figure out what works financially, makes most sense.
Okay. Commissioners, do you have any question of the applicant? Anyone? Thank you, sir. I will now open the public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak in support? Come forward, please. State your name.
Yasser Zaid. Yasser Zaid.
Okay.
I'm the owner of the adjacent property, and I am in support of the project.
You are in support of
Yes,
it?
sir.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else that'd like to speak in favor? Is there any opposition to the request for the rezoning? See none, so as a result, I will close the public hearing part of it and entertain a motion.
Motion to approve?
Have a motion to approve.
Second?
Have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, passes unanimous. Angela, we're now to item C.
Thank you. A public hearing will be held to consider application Z23-05 filed by SW57 Construction LLC, requesting a rezone from heavy commercial to two-family zoning district for approximately 1.294 acres of Lot 3, Block 2, Northwest Medical Park, located on the east side of Toller Road, north of West Loop 281, south of McCorder Park. The applicant is requesting the rezone from heavy commercial to two-family zoning district. The applicant would like to construct a duplex on this property. Toller Road is classified as a local roadway and is maintained by the city of Longview, and this type of development is appropriate along this roadway as long as access management is followed. Staff finds that the proposed zoning change is consistent with the comprehensive plan and surrounding uses, therefore it does not constitute spot zoning. I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Does the commissioners have any questions for the staff at this time?
Angela, is there going to be any fencing required since it's, smack in between, not retail, but the medical thing there?
So
And the
typically,
park?
we do not require fencing when a residential is built right next to commercial. So if commercial was built right next to residential, then they would be required fencing.
And that's the only, would become the only residential property on that road, is that correct?
So the park, although it is not used residential, it is zoned residential, and then across the street, there is some multifamily zoning across the street.
Okay, the applicant's present. If you'd come forward,
Lane Waters.
state your name and your address, please.
Lane Waters, 823 West Marshall, with SW57 Construction. Yeah, we're actually, we're wanting to do 3 separate duplexes, all facing Toller Road. 3 garages, 1 per.
How many duplexes did you say? I'm sorry.
Three total.
Three
Yes, sir.
duplexes. Okay. Anyone have any question of the applicant?
What square footage?
We're not
Not
sure
sure
yet.
yet.
I mean, we've got some preliminary drawings up at roughly 1,000 feet per side, so 2,000 per unit.
Okay.
And they'll have separate driveways and have a front entry garage on it and try to keep them nice. So.
People living there will get to hear the ball games.
Yeah, I catch fly ball.
On one side, on the other side, they won't hear anything. The mortuary
It's true.
part. All right, thank you, sir. Unless I have some more questions. I will now open the public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience that'd like to speak in favor? See none. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak in opposition to the request? If so, please come forward and state your name. See no one. Any of the commissioners have any additional questions of anyone? If not, I will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve. Do I hear a second?
Second.
And a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Passes unanimous. Regular agenda item D, Angela.
Thank you. A public hearing will be held to consider application Z23-06 filed by Darrell L. Bain and Saul Soto Lopez, requesting a rezone from general retail to single-family 5 zoning district for lots 12 and 13, Block 7, Marshall Heights, located at 114 and 1116 North 3rd Street. The applicant is requesting a rezone from general retail to single-family 5 zoning district. Currently, there is a single-family home at 1114 North 3rd Street, but both of them are zoned general retail. At 1116 North 3rd Street, it was previously a ballet studio. And the gentleman is looking at converting that into a single-family resident. North 3rd Street is classified as a local street and is maintained by the city of Longview. Staff finds the proposed zoning change is consistent with surrounding uses, therefore it does not constitute spot zoning. I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time.
So basically, all they're trying to do is to bring the zoning into general residence or for residents?
Yes, sir. So, yes, because right now, one of them is currently a single-family resident, and then the other one is converting to a single-family resident. So they're bringing those into compliance with the zoning.
Any questions for Angela, people? None? If the applicant's in the audience, if you'll please come forward.
Yes, sir. I'm Darrell Bain, 1350 Manufacturing, Dallas, Texas, and I am retired, and I'm moving out of Dallas, and I'm moving to Longview. And I had to, it was exactly what I was looking for. I've got Matthew Hartman going to do some modifications on the inside, and there you go.
Okay. Any questions? Okay, we thank you, sir. Okay, I'm going to open the public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak in support? Anyone in the audience that would like to speak in opposition? I see no one that would like to speak either for or against, so I will close the public hearing and entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve as presented.
We have a motion to approve
Second.
and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Motion passes unanimous. We're now to item E of the regular agenda. Angela.
Yes, sir. A public hearing will be held to consider M23-01, an ordinance updating the Unified Development Code.
I can give a spiel on that if you'd like.
One of you going to have to explain it.
Thank you, Mr. Noon. As P&Z may remember, the UDC was adopted was recommended in October 2020, and it was the culmination of 3 years worth of work. A lot of community input went into the document. It was part of the comprehensive planning process. It was a byproduct of that. Over the last couple of years since we've had it adopted, staff in the process of using it, getting feedback, just kind of doing the QC process of things that maybe didn't transfer from the old ordinance to the new ordinance like it should have or like we thought it would, or language, typographical errors, things of that nature, punctuation, as well as some minor changes to things that we saw that weren't working like they should have. And then also there were some major changes that we did based on some feedback from the community that we've heard. We sent out a document that was a summary of all the changes that outlined whether it was like an error or omission with a label as far as where it was in the document, and then kind of what the summary of that was, as you can see on the screen. We also with where the minor changes were, so that it'd be easy for you to understand. We also had the red line document that was available. There we go. And then, so going through that, and I'll just kind of talk about like the major changes, and then if y'all have any questions about any of the other substantive changes, then we'll be happy to answer those questions. But the main change that we really focused on was based on community feedback about sidewalks. And as you may remember, sidewalks were a big portion of our comprehensive planning process, that our community really wanted to know why we don't have more sidewalks. We want to be a walkable community, both from a fitness standpoint, from a mode of transportation standpoint. We focused on being more multimodal. And so through that process, we adopted sidewalk requirements. So in the implementation of that requirement, around town, you will see segments of sidewalks. When there's new development occurring, you'll see that development's required to install their portion of sidewalk. Well, So we've gotten feedback, why do we have sidewalks to nowhere? Why are we requiring that? What's the basis? And of course, if you never start installing sidewalks, you're never going to end up with a sidewalk network. And of course, we rely on grants and things like that. And if you've been on Loop 281 between Highway 80 and Gilmore Road, you've seen sidewalks going in on both sides. And that is that was TxDOT that installed that, but that is a direct byproduct of the city's desire to have sidewalks, for us having an ordinance, having a bicycle and pedestrian plan that outlines where our priorities are. And that's the other piece of that, is that when we institute the sidewalks, it's based on priority. So one of the things that we looked at is, okay, what are some things that we can do to kind of combat that negative of the sidewalks to nowhere, rather than, I don't think we want to go backwards and do away with the sidewalk requirement. And if you remember, new residential subdivisions, one of the things that we did is we don't require sidewalks on both sides of the road. We only require it on one side of the road as a compromise. And so we started looking at what other communities do. This is not something that is brand new to communities instituting a sidewalk requirement. And so what we're proposing is a fee in lieu of sidewalk, where if the development meets certain standards, then instead of them installing their segment of sidewalk, maybe there's some topography issues, or they're in mid-block and there's not going to be sidewalks planned for a number of years, and they just would rather not have that segment out there, then they can pay what it would cost to install that sidewalk to the city, and then the city will take that money, set it aside into a standalone sidewalk fund. The city will also budget money to go into that fund that we can use to install greater segments of sidewalks around the community based on our sidewalk priority plan. Also, we can use that to leverage for grants and things like that. As you may remember, we also got a grant from TxDOT that is for our trail system, and that's another component of our sidewalk network. It's not sidewalks on the side of the roads, but it is part of that overall pedestrian network. And so when we think of what our community is looking for is in terms of quality of life, in terms of attracting and retaining new businesses, quality of life, and sidewalks, all of that plays into that. But this is just one alternative that we're proposing that would really combat that sidewalk to nowhere. It's not, we're not going backwards and saying, hey, let's loosen our sidewalk requirements, because I don't think that's what our community really wants. I think it's just that stigma of sidewalks to nowhere. So that's how we're recommending to move forward in addressing that component. Yes, sir?
If he waives the sidewalk and pays you the fee for the sidewalk, and he's the first one in the subdivision, and you put his money in the kitty, are you gonna pave that lot when the others come in? How are we gonna do that?
Yeah, so
You're gonna borrow his money to add on to Gilmer Road somewhere, and you're not gonna have the money from him?
So this is probably not going to be applicable to residential subdivisions where the developer would have to plan that sidewalk network and on the front end. They may not have to install it on the front end, but they will have to put up a bond or something. This is going to be more for those commercial developments where they're only having to do their piece. Because in a subdivision, they're required to install that whole network into the subdivision.
Do we have something in place to keep from taking the money from the sidewalk fund and doing things that shouldn't be done with it?
Correct. It will be a dedicated fund for sidewalks.
Well, so the developer will only have to pay if they decide not to put the sidewalk in.
Correct.
And will that be a one-time thing? So if somebody develops something, they lose to pay in, and then sidewalks never come in 3 or 4 years down the road, they do another project, they only paid the one time, right?
Correct. Yeah, we're not going to, every time they add on and it, kicks in the site plan review process, we're not going to make them pay for sidewalks because it's a one and done deal.
For whoever buys that lot or any time down in the future.
Yeah.
It's a one and done. Okay.
But the money goes only into a sidewalk fund,
It'll be a
correct?
dedicated sidewalk fund only used for sidewalks.
And who will administer?
It's going to be administered by our Public Works Department. It'll be part of their CIP process. So they'll use the sidewalk and pedestrian plan. So ever so often, they'll look to see how much money is in there. They'll determine if there's a portion of a network that they can install when they're doing their CIP planning. And so, and if there is, then they'll include that in that annual project
And they can
process.
do grant funding and use that as a match for
We
grants
could
and
use it
things like
for,
that.
exactly. So, you know, we could leverage it for a lot of things to be, you know, to go towards that sidewalk in Longview.
That's the only major change you're making, other than the little things that you read through this that I read, so. There's a little here, a little bit here, a little bit there, you know, so. Yeah, it didn't look like anything was really that.
Yeah, the other thing too is primarily talking about sidewalks. So we've had more and more people ask about with all of our different park networks and side path networks about neighborhoods wanting to connect into that, or maybe even commercial developments. I don't know if y'all remember the rezone that we did over by the park, and they were going to have the big outdoor venue, and they were wanting to tie into the city park. So we started looking, like, well, we don't really have a standard for making that connection, and so that's another thing that we're codifying as a standard on how they would make that connection, on whether it would be private or if they wanted to. There's some opportunity where it could, if it made sense for that to be a public sidewalk connection, where they could dedicate that to the public.
And when you say public, that means that the city is responsible for maintenance and all the stuff
City
that
would
goes
be
with that, right?
responsible, and we would have a right-of-way through
So
there.
your
And there would be
developers-
some instances where that's appropriate, some instances it would not be appropriate. It would need to be, especially if it's for a neighborhood and they want to, you know, put a gate up or something, that would need to be privately owned. Another piece is when we adopted some requirements in our central business district, some architectural elements where we had facade requirements, where they had to meet certain standards. And when we started working through that, what we found is really there's a smaller section that's really applicable to, and that's primarily the Tyler Street corridor, where we have a higher concentration of historic buildings. What we found is in some of the areas still in the central business district, new construction, we were trying to recreate some elements that weren't really there. And so we just felt it more appropriate to kind of shrink that area to focus on that Tyler Street core. And then also talking about canopies. In the right-of-way, the downtown area, we have a lot of canopies that overhang the sidewalk in the right-of-way. And that section was actually just outlined in our sign section for sign canopies. And so we just kind of moved that into a more appropriate location and cleaned that up. And so this is kind of the timeline. We did give a presentation to City Council at one of the previous meetings. Tonight, we're asking for your recommendation to move it forward to council, where they will consider the proposed revisions at the March meeting. And then if they so choose to approve, then they would become effective April 1st. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any more questions from the commissioners?
The only one I marked was on the B4.04 fences.
Yes.
Could you explain that a little better, please? Is that residential, commercial, all?
So previously, and I'll try to answer your question because I know we made a lot of changes in that section. Previously, we had limited requirements for fences. Primarily, you can't do like barbed wire or metal fences, and it was kind of basic. And so we did add some requirements about fences in the front yard. And so what we did this revision is we kind of cleaned that up a little bit, because what we found is it really wasn't hitting what we intended it to do. And I think some of the placement and the materials that we had, it wasn't consistently written between residential and commercial, and so there's a lot of cleanup there as well, and clarifying the height of fences in the front yard, the material of fences, and think of, you know, if you're building a fence on the road, you can do that with more of like a see-through fence. And then as you get closer back to the house, it can get taller and then it can become more
What's
opaque.
the setback distance?
Yeah.
How far is that? Is it,
So a fence can go right on the property line, which is going to be property line right of way, which is going to be anywhere from
on the street?
5 to 8 feet from the edge of the street. You can have a fence, but it's going to have to be like a chain link or a decorative type.
It can't be a vision blocking privacy fence.
Correct. And then as you get back to the setback, you know, which could be 20, 30 feet and back towards where the front of the house is, then the fence can get taller and then it can become opaque for privacy and for obviously in the backyard, you know, if you want to have privacy fences. And then just clarifying the materials. I think like in the commercial areas used to, we talked about you couldn't do metal fences, but that's back because when you thought about metal fences, you were thinking about just the old galvanized corrugated material, but we have a lot of metal R-panel type fences that match building facades, and those aren't a problem, and so we just clarified that those can be used in certain situations.
So if I'm on the setback in a residential neighborhood, I have to go to the setback to be able to do 8 feet to the street? Or I have to go beyond that to do 8 feet?
Yeah, you can't do 8 feet beyond at the street. So you would have.
How far do I have to go back?
Let's see.
20 feet, 30 feet, how far?
It would depend on your zoning district, but wherever your building begins is where you could go up to 8 feet.
Okay.
From the front of your building towards the street can be a maximum height of 6 feet. But it needs to be, like Mr. Shirley said, it needs to be see-through. So like chain link or wrought iron, and that's really for a visibility standpoint.
And so for an 8-foot privacy fence on the front, I can go 1 foot behind the setback and I can go to 8 feet?
Yeah, so from the front of your facade back towards the back of your...
No, not from the setback, from the face of the house.
The face of the house to the back of your property. Could be 8 feet.
I can have a forward-facing 8-foot fence in my neighborhood.
In your backyard.
Okay. If I'm fencing my yard and I want to include the side of my house at the setback because my garage is front, I can do 8 feet right at the front edge of my house?
Yes, at the front edge of your
legally
house.
set back? Yes?
Yes, at the front edge of your house, because the face of your house from there back is considered basically backyard.
I understand what you're saying.
8-foot fences are so butt ugly, it's unbelievable.
Sure.
Out front.
Well, and it
And
wouldn't
how
be,
far
it
forward
wouldn't be
you
in
can
front of your
start
house.
them.
It would be from the front of your house back.
I understand. That's exactly my point. I don't like it. I've got them in my neighborhood, and when they did it, we're like, I guess they would have gone taller, but they couldn't get under the eave, couldn't get above the eave of the house. But, you know, the point is too, is if you don't do some other distance, the way to defeat what you've got would just be to drop back and go for it anyway.
Yeah, and it's a balance, because previous to the UDC 2 years ago, we didn't have a prohibition of these types of fences in the front yard, and that's why you will see in some areas a 6 or 8 foot privacy fence out to the driveway.
So,
Any other questions?
The fee schedule for the fee in lieu of sidewalks, has that been set already? Is it gonna be like a per square foot?
No, we have elected not to establish a fee schedule. Basically, what we're gonna go on is because there's so many nuances, is whatever it would cost you to put your sidewalks in at your particular location based on an engineer's cost estimate, which is what we would require anyways, is what you would pay us.
The city engineer or your engineer?
Your engineer and then our city engineer will review it for market analysis. And if they agree with it, if they don't, but that's how we normally do it.
Just like you're doing for the letters of credit.
Just like because most of the time, they're having to submit, well, all the time when they do sidewalks, they're having to do a review and inspection fee based on the cost. That's how we do the permitting. So we're having to get that information already to do it. I mean, cities do it a lot of different ways, but we kind of felt like because each property is a little bit different, it just made sense for them to just pay what their fair share is.
Well, your costs change on a daily basis on something like that. too,
Exactly.
so,
That's
yeah.
what I was thinking, yeah.
I mean, there's some cities that we looked at too that kind of do they'll add a contingency in there. They'll add kind of a multiplication factor if we know it's going to be 2 or 3 years before we do it. So you're going to add that increase in there. We elected not to do that, so.
Any other questions from commissioners? If not, I'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak in support? See none. Is there any opposition to the request from the audience? I see none. Any additional questions? If there's no additional questions, I will close the public hearing and entertain a motion.
Make a motion to recommend approving the changes as presented.
Second. Have a motion and a second to approve the recommendations as presented. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hear none. Passes unanimous. Angela, staff update.
Yes, sir. All items that were presented to City Council was approved by City Council. So that includes the one item where there was a split vote that was approved by City Council.
Okay. All right, at this time, then we will adjourn today's meeting. Thank you all.